Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lakewood 8 RTD Board of Directors Candidate Forum. I'm Mark Koberich. I'll be your moderator today in this effort to help you, the voter, put a face on the candidates in your district and get an understanding of where those candidates stand on the issues that you care about the most. All of the candidates running for seats on the board were invited to be part of our discussion for this broadcast. RTD is a massive, complex public entity covering all or part of 8 Colorado counties, touching potentially some 3 million people and spending vast amounts of taxpayer dollars. Those dollars are controlled by a total of 15 board members, each representing a specific geographic area, each with some 200,000 constituents, each director earning $12,000 a year plus expenses in 4-year terms. Elections are staggered so that 8 seats are open in one general election, 7 in the next. The Denver Metro Mayors Caucus is sponsoring our forum in cooperation with Lakewood 8. Views expressed in the forum are those of the candidates, not the views of the Denver Metro Mayors Caucus, RTD, or Lakewood 8. The Denver Metro Mayors Caucus has provided all the questions for the candidates. We should also note that the caucus is a non-partisan political organization that neither supports or opposes candidates. So, let's take a look at the district boundaries for this forum. District F includes most of the central portion of the city of Aurora. Its borders are roughly Colfax Avenue on the north, E-470 on the east, East Bellevue Avenue to the south, and I-225 on the west. This district also includes neighborhoods near the Aurora Reservoir. District H includes most of the southwest Denver metro area, including Highlands Ranch, South Glen, Greenwood Village, and most of Littleton. Its borders are roughly East Hamden Avenue on the north, South Quebec Street on the east, East Wildcat Reserve Parkway on the south, and as far as South Sheridan Boulevard on the west. And we are going to hear now from the candidates running for board seats in 2 RTD districts, F and H. Bob Broom is running in District F for the seat of term-limited RTD Director Tom DeBiason. Bob was elected to the Aurora City Council in 2003 and served until 2015. He, in fact, has experience in city governments in 3 different states. After also serving as Aurora City Manager, he pursued a career in investment banking and was a licensed stock and bond broker. Doug Tisdale is running for the seat in District H. Doug is looking to take over the seat of term-limited District H Director Kent Bagley. Doug is an attorney, president and CEO of Tisdale and Associates in Denver, doing corporate counseling and litigation, and he is the former mayor of Cherry Hills Village and has done work as a developer in the Vail Valley, and these days he spends most of his time working as the executive VP for the South Metro Denver Chamber. In Districts F and H, there is only one candidate. Even though they aren't running against each other, we wanted to give you the chance to hear from them, so they've agreed to sit together as colleagues and friends in a friendly fashion and discuss the issues that the candidates who do have opponents are talking about. Each candidate will now be given 2 minutes to speak for an opening statement and 1 minute at the end of our broadcast for closing comments. And after opening comments, I will ask as many questions as time permits, gentlemen, and each candidate will have the chance to respond with a 2-minute limit per response, and we will rotate the opportunity to answer first. Although, again, you're not opponents in this race. So we've agreed to be informal. We will use first names. Thank you very much for that. And Bob, you will go first. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark. My name's Bob Broom, and as you mentioned, I'm running for the RTD board for District F. District F is totally inside the city limits of Aurora. It's basically south of Colfax and east of Interstate 225. I'm running as a former city councilman in Aurora to help integrate the new light rail line that's going to be running along I-225 into the city of Aurora. Back in the 70s when I-225 was built, it became the main street for the city of Aurora as opposed to East Colfax, and this is going to solidify that stature as far as that corridor is concerned. I bring quite a bit of experience, I believe, appropriate experience to this position. As Mark mentioned, I worked in city government for 21 years as a finance director and as a city manager. I've worked with large boards. For example, Dr. Cog has about 50 boards, and Doug and I served on that board together. I served on the Denver Metropolitan Wastewater Reclamation District Board for about 8 years, including serving as chairman of that board. And that, of course, included about 50 board members from all over the metropolitan area, with only, I think, Littleton and Englewood has their own treatment plant. Finally, I worked for about 25 years as an investment banker, providing financial advice and underwriting hundreds of millions of dollars of bonds for infrastructure for cities, counties, school districts, and special districts in the Front Range primarily, but also in surrounding states. I think my background and experience will bring a lot to RTD. Thank you.
A lot of experience, no question. Thank you, Bob. Doug, now your opening statement, if you will.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate it. It's a privilege to be here. I'm seeking this office because I care about transportation. I'm dedicated to transit. I'm determined to create and maintain a safe, economical, efficient, and uncongested transportation system. So what qualifies me to do this job? Because I've done it. First, for 11 years, I served on the board of DRCOG. That's the Denver Regional Council of Governments Bob just mentioned. It consists of 44 cities and 9 counties in the metro area. And for the last 3 years of that, I served as one of the executive officers on DRCOG. DRCOG's principal responsibility under federal and state law is to set policy and to allocate funding for transportation and personal mobility. At DRCOG, I was a facilitator of consensus, bringing about positive results for the region. Secondly, I was on the executive committee at the Metro Mayors Caucus. Now, that's a conference of 41 of us mayors who collaborate together to protect and improve the quality of life in our region, including transportation. And then thirdly, I'm the Executive Vice President for Economic Development at the South Metro Denver Chamber. In that capacity, I work with the largest employers in Colorado, people like Lockheed Martin and CH2M, the University of Colorado, Sterling Ranch, companies and institutions large and small. I know these people. I can partner with them in fashioning solutions to one of their major concerns, transportation. And that's why I believe I'm qualified to be the director for District H for the RTD Board.
Doug, thank you. And let's move to our first question. And Bob, I'll ask you to answer first, if you would. This involves a problem that RTD has identified to some extent with ridership on some of their system. And it seems there are 3 primary contributing factors, those being cost or inconvenience or just a general lack of knowledge of how the system works, because parts of it are fairly complex, something that you need to figure out initially as a rider and then probably stay up on day to day as new lines open. But I'm wondering, as an RTD board member, how would you approach this problem in an effort to increase ridership by eliminating those 3 variables, or do you think that's possible?
Well, one of the major impediments in the minds of a lot of people about using mass transit is the fact that they worry about the last mile, if you will. That means when they reach the destination, like the light rail stop, they may have a half a mile or more they're going to have to go from that point to where they go to work or to where they want to go to a play or whatever it might be. That's an area where I think there needs to be improvement in our system. Planning in Aurora currently on the Fitzsimmons campus is going to have a shuttle bus funded by the hospitals that will meet each train as it comes in, and then will go over the entire campus, which is almost a square mile, and drop people off whichever hospital or other institutional that they need to go to. On the other end of the spectrum, when you need to get to your bus or light rail, there needs to be some better connectability for people. And you know, I've read recently that Uber and Lyft have begun to work out contracts with business improvement districts, for example, and that's something I'm going to pursue. I'd like to see a system similar to that put in at the Aurora City Center, which would allow people to get off of the light rail and be able to get to the Aurora Community College, the City Hall, the main library. Adams County has a major social services building that's in that area. Plus, you have the 2 major shopping centers that are also at that stop. So that's how I think I would probably try to address that.
Doug?
You know, the most important thing that exists about these issues that you address is what Bob mentioned, and that's the first mile, last mile problem. And Centennial has just embarked upon an exciting initiative that they have called Go Centennial. And what they're doing is, as a pilot project, they're going to have the lift operators come along and take care, not ski resorts now, but the operators of lift vehicles come along and be responsible for getting people to and from their destination from the light rail station in Centennial. And that's a fabulous opportunity for riders to have a reliable, safe, and secure way to get from the train station to wherever it is that they're ultimately going, or vice versa. So I like that solution that they've come up with, and it's a scalable product that Centennial is working on, and that will be exceptionally helpful. Relative to the information and people learning about it and how to use the system, it's really interesting because we do have some good apps. We've got Ride Denver and so forth that work for giving people some information about the RTD, but the difficulty is a lot of people don't feel comfortable in using those because they're just not as familiar with smartphones and iPads and going onto a website. I'd love to see some more outreach and education by community groups partnering with RTD, for example, to go into senior centers and to show them how can you run these apps on your phone. They're not all that complicated. How can you get information from the computer? How can you get information simply by calling RTD and asking questions? So those are some initiatives I'd like to see followed.
Let's talk about the technology issue, and I'll start with you, Doug, this time. In fact, we have a marvelous train system. It has its problems, but it is the envy of much of the country, and there are mayors and city planners, I think you will agree, across the country who are very envious of our rail system and the way that it operates, even though it's hit a few bumps. And you mentioned technology, and I'm wondering, particularly digital information. Going forward, would you as an RTD board member, would you be in favor of adopting even more technology for our system, and do you think you would find support for that on an RTD board?
Yes and yes. I do believe that it is an excellent idea to have increased technology to provide information, real-time information on where is the train, where is the bus. I spent the month of January in London on a case that I had, and I was always amazed that I had 3 different apps that would give me all of the information I needed to know about how to get around on the bus or on the tube in London, and the bus stops all individually had these indicators of when the next bus was coming. So I think increased technology is something that people want and would readily adapt to, and I think that we have some capacity within our limited and constrained budgetary resources to be able to do that. And I know that there are a number of the members of the board presently and who will be continuing who do have support for that. So I'd like to see that continue on. And I think that as we evolve through the coming years, we're going to see even more and more opportunities for that. You look at all of the news stories now about driverless cars. Hopefully they have riders, but you've got driverless cars, and you say, all right, that's a technology we're not quite ready for, I think, but we probably at some point will. But we're ready for the technology that we have in place now with our system, and I think we can enhance information about that that will help all of our riders.
And Bob, you would agree with that?
I would agree with that. One article I recently read in the Wall Street Journal was about a German firm that is building shuttle buses that don't have drivers. And so it's kind of like getting on a elevator instead of going up and down. You can just push a button, it'll take you to the next stop, and that type of thing. I think there's a lot of promise in those types of things. I'm a little bit older than Doug, and so I'm not quite as tech savvy. My phone is smarter than I am. But
well, we all have that problem, frankly.
Yeah. But I think there are a lot of ways that things can be computerized to the point, and there already are, the apps that he was talking about, that will help everybody. I mean, my grandson, he runs off his smartphone, and he can go everywhere on RTD just by using those apps. I'm going to have to learn those, obviously, because I'm relatively new to the mass transit business.
Right. Our questions today, by the way, are provided by the Denver Metro Mayors Caucus. They have another issue that they'd like for you to discuss as candidates. Some have argued that RTD's fare structure favors wealthier choice riders over the transit-dependent population, which in fact is RTD's core ridership, the transit-dependent population. Do you think that is a valid criticism, and how do you think it should be addressed? And Bob, I'll start with you.
I don't really think it's a valid criticism. You know, fare setting is very difficult. Each time RTD, and as I recall remembering, raises rates, they lose about 5% of their ridership. And then it takes a year or so to build it back up to where it's at. And you've got to balance the budget, and there's no magic money that's going to come from anywhere else. And so it's a balancing act to decide what types of services you're going to provide, the frequency of that service, and so forth. And so while we may have a lot of great ideas, we are constrained by making that budget balance. One of the things that concerns me, since I sat on the Dr. Cog board when Fast Tracks first came up, was that there was a promise made to voters to complete the entire system. Well, that's not going to occur, or it's not going to occur for a long period of time. And so that's something that I want to work on, is to fulfill that promise that was made to the voters. It may be that that north line is not going to have the ridership that was originally envisioned, but 2 weeks ago we drove up to Yellowstone Park and we went up I-25 North. And the growth going on up I-25 North is just absolutely incredible. So I'm convinced that the ridership will be there by the time that this can be built.
A wealthier rider system, a system that favors wealthier riders, Doug, valid criticism?
I don't know that I would agree that it's a valid criticism, but it is a valid concern, and I think we must always address that and be responsive to the needs of our riders. I think that programs that we have in place, such as the ride passes that employers provide, and in some cases employers voluntarily will provide that and provide a full subsidy for the employees who wish to make use of that. And many of them, as a result, have found that it's easier to get the employees to be there. When I talked about, for example, working with all of these large employers around the state, one of the reasons we have such vibrant economic development in the Denver region is that we have a tremendous talent pool. Well, a talent pool doesn't do you much good if the talent can't get to the job. So you do have to make sure that at all times you're sensitive to what the pricing is, and I agree with Bob that there's always, whenever there is a rate increase, there is a fall off, but then there's an evening out, and I think that probably is a structure that is created by both the employers providing further subsidies, by employees understanding that this really does save them a tremendous amount of money concerning what it would be to be in an SOV. That's a single occupant vehicle, and the one thing we want to do is get the SOVs off the road, and that's what RTD is able to provide. So as I say, it's a concern. I don't know that it's actually a criticism of the structure, and it's certainly something that we are always addressing, and I will address as well.
Bob mentioned it, and I know it's top of mind for you as well, the question of funding and for the promises made to voters long-term about these lines that would be finished, some of them as far out as 2030 and 2040. And as you know, I know the board is getting tremendous pressure from the ratepayers, the taxpayers in those cities saying, hey, you know, I'll be dead before I get a train, and somebody's got to come up with a solution. Do you think there is a viable solution, as Bob has mentioned and is interested in pursuing, to find a way to make those lines work?
I really do believe that, for example, the Aurora line was one illustration of that, with a public-private partnership being established and moving that project forward much, much sooner than RTD could have done on its own. So clearly, looking for and securing those opportunities for public-private partnership will give us the opportunity to build out. Look at what we've done this year. We've got 5 lines that have opened up this year, with the University of Colorado A line out to the airport, and the B line, the Aurora line, hopefully in December. We'll be opening the G line opening up, and the rest. And I look at this and I see the extensions that we're now working on for the Southeast line, and ultimately for the Central line, to bring that up to connect to the University of Colorado A line. All of those things will take time, excuse me, but I submit they will occur. And when we say, well, this will take another 20 years, Bob and I are of close enough vintage that we can look back and remember 20 years very clearly. We know what that was like. So looking forward 20 years isn't quite as far when you're able to look back and realize you remember things clearly from 20 years ago. So if it takes 20 years, and it well may, for the completion of the system, parts will be implemented along the way. That's a reality that I think we all should accept, because it gives us the greatest transportation system in the country in terms of other people coming here and confirming that to us and telling us that.
Right, right. Bob?
I might, expand on that a little bit. I think one way of speeding this process up is to increase the district's tax base. There's a lot of large subdivisions in Aurora that aren't even in the RTD district. And so all they got to do is drive a mile. They can still get on a bus and use the system like everybody else, but they're not paying into it like they should be doing. So something should be done to make sure that all of those subdivisions are brought into the district. The other thing that's happened recently is there's been a break in the internet sales tax situation. RTD suffers just like cities, because if you ordered something over Amazon, it came tax-free to you. Now that wall is being broken down, and so this is going to improve RTD's tax base significantly. So it'll be nice to see the figures over the next 2 years as to how much additional revenues that brings in to help finish out the system. I'm really reluctant to go to voters and say we need to increase the sales tax again. And they're going to say, wait a minute, you didn't deliver what you promised the last time.
Exactly.
And so I'm not really very happy about that. But on the flip side, another thing that worries me is that all of the lines that you mentioned opening up means that there's operating costs associated with those lines. And the way the fare structures work, only 20% of the cost of operating a bus or light rail comes from fares, and 80% has to come from sales tax primarily, but federal grants and some other miscellaneous revenues that RTD has. So there's a lot of conflicting things going on, and it's going to take a little while to get a handle on those to determine how best to go forward with completing that line up north that was promised.
That line, particularly, do train lines become bus lines, do you think, as we go forward?
I hope not. I really think that if you just mean substituting a bus like what was done up to Boulder.
The Boulder line, right.
Yeah, I hope not, because the train experience is much better for the rider, I think. And those lanes that the buses are using are certainly needed by automobiles and everything else.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, they're competing along with everything else. It's going to take a joint effort between a lot of different agencies to solve all these problems going forward.
Doug, you think train lines become bus systems instead?
No, I don't. I think that there is a time, an interim period where in some cases, to help with service while we're waiting for the completion of the system, there will have to be enhanced bus service and treatment of the lanes and the vehicles that are out there. But no, I don't believe that we're looking at a scenario where we'll ultimately say, well, it was a great plan, but we just couldn't do it. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Coloradans will allow that to happen, because they don't think that way, they don't act that way, and there are revenue sources that we can tap into. in terms of the federal funding and the state funding, that's right. That's something that RTD is in fact reliant on and has been very successful with. We need to make sure we maintain that success. That's important. And we also need to, as Bob points out, because we have worked on this issue relative to the Main Street Fairness Act, marketplace fairness in terms of taxing the internet sales just as if they were sales in the city, because it is a sale in the city, and that's what sales tax is all about. And most cities do live on that, and RTD needs to live on that as well. So that is something that I think we're going to see a tremendous increase in revenues there as years go by and everyone starts complying. There's always a compliance curve that we face with something like that, but I think it will happen.
Let me circle back to the Centennial Project just briefly, because RTD says it has been marvelously successful, the first mile, last mile, and offering free rides to the Dry Creek station. I know riders up and down the system are saying, hey, you know, what about us? How come it was there and not here? And is this something that you think has longer legs? I mean, what do you think happens next?
It definitely has longer legs. It started in Centennial because Centennial had the foresight. Centennial had the vision. Centennial went out and got a grant in order to put this in place. And I won't mention the grantors on that for fear of leaving out one, but there were several very large corporations that were extremely philanthropic in helping to get this going. And the idea is after the 6-month period, then will they be able to renew some of the grants? Will they have to change it so that there is a modest cost associated with doing the first mile, last mile for each individual using the lift cars that come out to pick them up? I think there will not be a resistance to that, because when people do take into account the overall convenience, the tremendous opportunity presented to get onto the light rail and to network throughout the region, they're going to be grateful to say, you know, if this costs me $2 to do that, I think I will spend the $2 to do that. And I think that if we have some that are subsidized and some that can be a straight fare on the lift to create that last mile, that works. And as for the technology, in terms of how they put this into place and how they communicate with people who need to get one of those vehicles to come pick them up and take them to the station or vice versa, that's something that is absolutely scalable. I talked to the mayor of Centennial, Kathy Noon, and to others in the city government who put that program in place, and they said it is scalable and it is not proprietary. We are more than happy to share this information with every city in the region.
And Bobby, you're a proponent as well?
Yes, I am. In fact, you know, I worked on a similar situation in the town of Blackhawk probably 15 years ago, where we formed a business improvement district, and all of the casinos come together basically, and you know, they provide transportation. So you know, it works. Now, not every stop is going to lend itself to a business improvement district, because some stops are primarily residential in character, and probably those don't lend themselves to having you know, a shuttle bus service or something like that. But Uber and Lyft might work in, you know, in certain things. I've gotten some feedback from people that live in Heather Gardens, for example, which is an older community.
Right, yes.
And they want to have the ability to get from their homes.
Access to a stop, right?
Access to a stop.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be the key to the future, I think, success of the system.
Well, I must say our only real rule here today was no wrestling. So we've made it to this moment. Congratulations to both of you. Nicely done.
I'd vote for him any day.
I'll vote for him any day.
There you are. See, not running against each other again. So time now for your closing statements, gentlemen, if you would. You have 1 minute each, and Doug will begin with you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, for the opportunity. Just want to say, I grew up riding the bus in Los Angeles, in Detroit, in Denver. Nowadays, I ride the light rail and the commuter rail. So I want our riders to know that I understand them and that I care for them. And I want our workers at RTD to know that I care for them as well. Before I was a lawyer, I was a Teamster. When I was in college, I joined the Teamsters Union, and I am an honorably withdrawn member of that union. And then, as a lawyer, sometimes I represented management in union contract negotiations. And as a mayor, I worked with government officials all across the United States. I understand and I appreciate the concerns of all of our constituencies. And that's why I ask for your vote on November 8 for District H for the RTD Board.
Doug, thank you. Bob, your closing statement.
Thank you. This has been an interesting session. I think discussions like this are, really worthwhile. I don't have an opponent, and so I'm not going to talk about so much getting out the vote or anything like that. But I would like to thank Tom Tobiasen, who's the outgoing chair of RTD, who's endorsed my candidacy, and Mayor Steve Hogan, who endorsed my candidacy, for doing that early on in the process. What I look forward to is completing the entire fast track system and then taking a step back and making a plan for the entire Front Range of Colorado. It wouldn't be RTD's responsibility to make this all happen, but RTD, in connection with entities like the E470 Highway Authority, which works closely with CDOT on all the fast lane projects around, get everybody together and provide a transportation system up and down the Front Range, all the way from Pueblo up to Cheyenne, for that matter, and also the I-70 mountain corridor needs to be served with transit. And those entities can't start out on their own and get those things done. They're going to require help from everybody.
Bob Broom, thank you. Doug Tisdale, thank you. You guys are down ticket, but voters, I think, understand the importance of the race given the plum that RTD has become.
Vote your ballot from the bottom up.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Ballots will be mailed to all active voters in Colorado on the 17th of October. Voter service and polling centers will be open on the 24th of October. Voting will end at 7 p.m. on the 8th of November. You may register to vote at any time up to and including on Election Day. You can do so on the Colorado Secretary of State's website or in person at a voter service and polling center. And to receive a ballot by mail, you must have been registered by no later than October 31st.